Welcome, everyone. We're excited to have you here. Yuyi is going to kick us off for the evening.
Hi everyone, welcome to the first preview of the AP Macroeconomics review session. This is going to take place from starting today, and if you keep following us, then we'll have a few more next week. And yeah, so a couple reminders. Let's try to be supportive of each other. We're all here to learn and to share our knowledge, and also be patient. If you notice yourself having any questions, we will try to address as many of them in the chat as possible. And also, please be kind to us, but also to one another because we are all real people with feelings. So, yeah. All right. So, some tips to make the most out of these review sessions. So, first of all, is notes. So, we suggest that you could take notes if you find them to be helpful. However, you don't have to write everything down that's on the slides. Just try to write down what you personally find the most helpful. And yeah, and also, we will have these videos on replay for you guys when our review session ends. So if you feel like you miss anything, you can always go back and you have the slides available to you if you want to access them after. And third is the group chat. So on the right, you could probably find like a bunch of different symbols. The first one is the main chat, which you could use to share any tips or ask any questions. And there's also other functions like Q&A if you want to ask a question, and we'll have the polls later on for any like multiple choice or like taking a poll that you could interact with. So if you have any questions, again, feel free to use the Q&A tab and we will try to address as many of them as possible. So here's the upcoming schedule for AP Macro. Today we'll be going over Unit 1. Oh, pardon me, not Unit 1, sorry. Kind of an overview of like all the units that's going to be today. And then Unit 1 all the way until Unit 6. And we'll kind of do like a final session of all the units together. And I'm Yui, one of the student hosts. I'm a senior in high school, and I love macro because it helps me understand a lot of different news articles that's going on in the world.
Hi everyone, I'm Mint and I'm a sophomore in high school and I love macro because I also love government and politics and I think macro goes really well with stuff like that.
Hi y'all.
Hey
And
everyone.
don't mind me chewing right now. I'm still eating, but I love macro because I like what Min said. I also like how government and politics kind of intertwines into this very unique field. That's what I like about it.
Hey everyone. I'm Andrew. I'm a junior in high school, and I love macro because it teaches me how to use money as a tool in the economy.
Hi, I'm Colin. I'm a senior in high school, and I like macro because I think it's very applicable. The real world revolves around my macro, and that's why I love it.
And Yuyi's already introduced herself. I'm Michelle Lux. I'm going to be your teacher host. I'm in the Austin area. I would love to hear where everyone's from. We have people from all over the United States in our group and also out there in the audience. So go ahead and say where you're at. We'd love to hear about it. Um, I have taught macroeconomics for about 10 years and I love macroeconomics. I think it explains so much of the world that we live in, and you can do some great predictors of what's going to be happening in the future. And we're really excited to have each one of you here tonight.
Yay! Awesome. Okay, so thank you for all of the introductions. And now I'm going to go over the agenda for today. So we're going to be going over the different portions and sections of the exams and how they're weighted. So, for example, the multiple choice section, the FRQ with the short FRQ first and the long FRQ. We'll do like a breakdown, like how many minutes they are, our suggested time for you to answer each question, our tips for multiple choice, tips for FRQs, some equations, and we'll have a practice quiz in the end, followed by a Q&A question where we'll answer your questions. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to use the chat or use the Q&A function. And be sure to follow us on social media. And all of the social medias use the same handle of @think Fiveable.
I'll be going over a quick overview of what the AP Macroeconomics exam is like and the whole format and how much each unit is worth on the test. So first is section 1, where you'll be given 70 minutes to do 60 multiple choice questions, and that averages out to around 1 minute 10 seconds per question, and that's worth 67% of your total exam score. With section 2, you'll get 3 free response questions and an hour to do them. So the first question is going to be a little bit longer. It'll have probably around 5 or 6 parts all the way from A to F. And then that question will be worth 50% of the entire FRQ score. We advise you to spend around 5 minutes planning and 25 minutes responding to that one. And then question 2 and 3 will be the same type, where it'd be a short free response, and those are each worth 25% of the free response score section, and spending around 15 minutes per those would be a good time breakdown. On the right is macro has 6 units, unit 1 to 6, and they're each weighted a little bit differently on the test. And so unit 1 you won't see as much, but for example unit 3, 4, 5 are very heavy hitters, right? And you'll see that from around 20% for each of them will be what the test is. And so those are very important units, and we'll get to that later as well. So with multiple choice questions, in general, there's a few pointers of general advice that we'd like to give. First is focusing on understanding key economic concepts that are covered in macro. And so macro, everything kind of revolves around aggregate supply and demand, fiscal policy, monetary policy, foreign exchange, inflation, unemployment, and economic growth. And so if you know how these concepts work together and how and if you really understand what they mean and how to graph some of them, then you'll be able to understand basically everything that comes within AP Macro. Another thing, questions often include graphs and charts, so make sure you know how to interpret them. And then if you ever have doubts about any questions, the number one most important thing probably is to create a visual for yourself. So if you ever don't know where to start on a question, start by drawing a graph and see where that takes you. And finally, using the process of elimination can help you eliminate very obvious and incorrect answer choices, and that can help narrow the number of choices that you have to select to get to the correct answer. So for the first free response, it's a long one, like I said earlier, and it makes up 33% of the exam score and 50% of the free response score. You'll have to make assertions about economic concepts, and again, we'll see an example on the slide right after this. If we could just see that example real quick. And so this is an example of one free response that you might find on the test. We do have a poll as well. So if you navigate on the right-hand side to where it has the bar graph, there should be a poll visible that asks you what concept do you see come up the most in this. And so there's parts from A to E in this free response. And just look at it real quick and see which ones do you think come up most in this free response. Okay, I'm seeing a few ADASs, a few long run. Yeah, so as the votes trickle in, we definitely do see a lot of ADAS here. And then we do see as well, like for example, Part B says no policy action. So that's not talking about policy, but Part C does talk about policy. And then Part D has a little bit about the loanable funds market, and Part E talks about bonds and as well as economic growth in the long run. So ADAS and long run consequences definitely show up a lot. Now for the short FRQs, again, they're very similar to the long FRQ. They're just way a little shorter. And these two questions, you'll probably spend around 15 minutes per question answering. And this is an example of one of the shorter ones. As you see, there's only 4 parts to this one and no subparts. Again, there's another poll on the right-hand side that asks which concept you see the most. I'm seeing a good mix of stuff. And yeah, this is a lot of these FRQs won't just stay on one topic. They'll go through a lot. And so, for example, part A talks about Phillips curves, which relates to inflation and unemployment. Part B is ample reserves. Part C uh, has a question about financial capital and like cash inflow, and then monetary policy as well. And part D is a foreign exchange question. So basically, all of those choices that you want to mark on the right are correct. And lastly, just here's another one. All of these ones that we're showing are from the 2023 FRQ test that was actually administered by the AP. And so these are real questions actually given. And there's one more poll on the right-hand side. We can see on part A talks about unemployment, part B, recession and inflationary gaps, part C, capital and consumer goods, and then a production possibilities curve, and part D has more about unemployment. If any of these concepts seem a little foreign to you right now, don't worry. We'll be going over them both today as an overview as well as in the specific sessions later. So for a few final FRQ tips, we want to make sure that you understand the prompt by reading it carefully. I advise to read it first once through and then kind of get a grasp on what you want to accomplish or what the question is asking you to accomplish, and then read it again just to make sure that you know exactly what you want to write about. And then after that, one tip is not to restate the question or anything, but get straight to what you want to answer. Correct terminology as using AD equals aggregate demand, but the cost does not equal price. And then this is very important. So you have to make sure you identify and label each axis clearly for every curve. And with an acronym you can use to help you, that's ACE, ACE. So you have to label the axis, the curve, and as well as where the equilibrium point is. With shifts in the curve, you must show changes in each curve with arrows or sequencing. And then you also have to show the new intersection. So on the right-hand side, you can see as the graph, as the 81 line shifts right, you can see there's rightward shifting arrows, and then the Y1 shifts to Y2, and PL1 goes to PL2. And that new equilibrium is identified through the dashed lines. So now we'll begin with a little bit of content. The first concept that we'll cover is the production possibilities curve, which is part of Unit 1. It makes a few assumptions, and this curve is very important if you want to see how an economy can manufacture certain goods. For example, it assumes that only two goods can be produced, that resources are fixed, and that technology is fixed. And on the right-hand side, if you see, there's two different graphs. There's a constant PPC where if you make one extra hoodie, that equals one less t-shirt being made, versus an increasing PPC where the opportunity cost is greater than one. And so one does not, increasing one's production of one good by one does not decrease the other ones by one, but in fact it decreases it by even more. And this can show us a few things. First thing, show us allocative and productive efficiency. It can also show us what's scarce in an economy, and as well as the opportunity cost of producing one good over the other. Now, Mint's going to talk a little bit more about some other concepts.
Thank you, Colin. So the first concept is really important. It's about the equilibrium AS80/ADAS model, which stands for the aggregate demand, aggregate supply model. The graph on the left with the short run aggregate supply and the aggregate demand shows the short run aggregate equilibrium where both of those curves intersect. The one on the right includes another curve, the long run aggregate supply, and where all three curves, long run and short run aggregate supply and aggregate demand intersect, is called the long run aggregate equilibrium. And the ADAS model shows the economy at the full employment output, where that long run aggregate supply is vertical. And I think there's a poll for you to take. It's on the right with the bar graph, asking what type of output is this economy experiencing? Is it a positive output gap, negative output gap, or is the economy in full employment? I'm seeing a lot of answers for positive output gap, and that is correct. The short run equilibrium is ahead of the long run aggregate supply, so the economy is experiencing a positive output gap. This is where the economy produces a short run real GDP output beyond its potential real GDP, which means the economy is overheating, it's producing much more than it should be. But the unemployment level is low because at that high level of GDP, we're going to need a lot of people working in factories to produce that much. The next type of output gap is a negative output gap, and that's where the short run equilibrium is behind the long run aggregate supply. It's when the economy produces a short run real GDP output that's less than its potential real GDP. That means unemployment is high because we're not requiring as many workers to produce stuff because we're not producing a lot. That means that income levels and consumption and the standard of living are all going to decrease. The next important concept is the loanable funds market. It's the interaction between borrowers and savers in the financial market, where the supply of loanable funds and the demand of loanable funds intersect is the real interest rate, and it's where the amount of borrowing equals the amount of saving. The savers in the loanable funds market are made up of public plus private savings, and the demanders are the borrowers of loanable funds. Another important graph that connects to the loanable funds market is the money market model, where the supply of money and the money demand intersect is where the quantity of money demanded equals the quantity of money supplied. And on the y-axis, that also shows what the nominal interest rate is. You can shift the money supply, and the people that shift the money supply is the Federal Reserve, or the Fed in the United States. Also, they are known as the central bank. They have three tools of monetary policy in limited reserves: OMOs, which are open market operations. They can buy or sell bonds. They can change the discount rate, which is the rate at which banks borrow overnight loans from the Fed, or the required reserve ratio, which is the required reserves that banks need to hold. Any of those tools can shift the money supply left or to the right. And I'm going to pass it on to Desmond, who's going to talk about another very important concept.
Thanks, Mint. Hey, y'all. So we are going to talk the Phillips curve. So the Phillips curve represents the inverse relationship between inflation and unemployment. So you're probably thinking to yourself right now, like, what's an inverse relationship? So in the very simple way of putting this, when something is up, the other thing is down, and there's always going to be a reason why for that. In our case, we got inflation and unemployment. So when inflation is high, that represents, it represents our economy doing too much. Like, we're producing beyond what's sustainable for our economy. Like, we're producing extra, you could say. We're producing like a lot that's just not really needed and not really good for the economy. And so to produce all this stuff, right, we need firms, and we need lots of firms. With these lots of firms, these firms are going to be employing people, right? So you're going to have lots of people being employed at these firms, right? And so you're going to see low employment because, like, well, lots of people are employed, right? And though this sounds like a good thing because, like, we don't want to be unemployed. I don't want to be unemployed. The problem with that is that it's not sustainable, right? Because once our resources kind of start to run dry, given the overuse that we have with high inflation, you're going to see these firms not able to produce as much, and they're not going to be meeting their profit margins, and those firms are going to be laying off their workers, which is also not great. So, and then likewise, when you see unemployment is high, lots of people aren't employed. So like people are not making their checks. Bills are not paid. And when bills can't be paid, we really don't have that kind of spending to go on and, pay for things. The economy isn't stimulated because money isn't in pockets, right? So both inflation and unemployment tie down to just production in general, right? With production, you see that we have lots of production when inflation is high and low production when when unemployment is high. So that's why we can kind of draw this connection between inflation and unemployment to kind of get our short run Phillips curve. Because I realized I forgot to mention that there are two types of Phillips curve: you have the short and the long run. But this is the short run. It's a reflection of the aggregate demand and aggregate demand graph. That's because aggregate demand and aggregate demand, as you may already know, that is really based in production, right? Similar to how our Phillips curve is. So we're going to explore that a little more in the next slide. We're going to be talking about aggregate demand. So when we see that aggregate demand increases, right, you're going to see that we're going to move down along the Phillips curve, right? Sorry, I looked at that wrong because of the A and the B. Which also, humble tip for your exams, make sure that you read your graphs, right? Because if you make the mistake I made, you totally would have lost points. So we see we got point A, and the economy is moving down to point B, right? So our aggregate demand is decreasing, right? So that represents prices falling and a quantity being produced at that point is also falling. So when we see prices fall, that represents our inflation rate going down, right? Because prices going down, inflation's going down. But we also see, right, that our quantity that the economy is producing is also falling. And so when firms are producing less, they're not making as much money. And when they're not making as much money, they're going to look at their workers and go, we really can't keep you guys employed. We got to let you go. Pink slip, fired, whatever you want to call it. So you're going to see unemployment increase in this case, and vice versa for if aggregate demand were to increase. Then on the next slide, we're going to be talking about shifts in the short run Phillips curve. So when short run aggregate supply increases, you're going to see price fall, you're going to see quantity go up, which is going to cause the whole short run Phillips curve to shift, right? So why is this happening? Well, price falls, right? When price falls, inflation falls. But if you pay attention to our graph right here, you're going to see that the quantity that the economy is producing is going up. We're producing more. So unemployment is going to be falling because we got firms that are producing more. We need more workers to help us produce more, to make more money, right? So we see inflation falling, and we also see unemployment falling. How could we move along the curve when neither of them are going up per the inverse relationship? So due to this, we're going to see the short run Phillips curve. We're going to see it shifting inward, yeah? Now we're going to go to the next slide. We are going to be looking at equilibrium. Oh, oops, wrong one. Long run Phillips curve. I almost forgot this one. So the long run Phillips curve. This one represents full employment output. Full employment output is the concept that the economy wants to produce where it is like sustainable. It's the ideal place for the economy to utilize its labor resources. I think of it kind of like Goldilocks, right? We have like, I think it was porridge, right? I hope so. We have like the hot porridge, and you got the cold porridge, you got the warm porridge and whatnot. What was I saying? Yeah, and so we want the economy to kind of operate with the warm porridge, right? And that's what our full employment output is representing here, yeah? So In the long run, that's what our long run Phillips curve represents. So you don't see a trade off between inflation and unemployment because the long Phillips curve is just based on the economy's production possibilities. See what else to say. I think that covers it for this slide. So when we go to the next slide, you're going to be looking at equilibrium gaps. So I believe there is a poll for this one. So we're going to be looking at the black and white graph on our far left, yeah? So there are different letters, right? And with these different letters, they correspond to a different type of gap that we're experiencing. So, we do have a poll, yeah, so, we're going to look at this poll right here. Look at those letters. Okay, y'all, I made an error. We did not prepare a poll for this one. That was on my bad. So I'm just going to ask you guys right here, because we got the time. Okay, so let's look at letter A right here, yeah? Drop which type of output gap you think is happening at letter A, right? We're going to be looking at this black and white graph over here, yeah? Okay, I'll give you guys just a little bit more time. Okay, then. So I see we got some results in the chat. So the answer for A is going to be a negative gap, and let me explain why. So think of long run Phillips curve as like your PPC, right? Production possibilities curve, yeah? So this A right here, point A, we're going to use my hands as a model because I don't got paper on me. So point A is going to represent us operating within our PPC. I guess our PPC for labor, you could say. So you're going to be having a negative output gap because the economy is underutilizing its labor resources. If it were to be a positive output gap, you would see like letter B, for example, you would see us operating right out here, outside what's potential for the economy. Both of them aren't good or whatnot, but positive output gap, negative output gap. So then we're going to go to the next slide, where we're going to have my friend Yui talk about the foreign exchange market.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Desmond. I'm now going to be talking about the Forex graph, which is also known as the foreign exchange graph that illustrates the relationship in exchange rates. So exchange rates are determined by the interaction of people that want to trade in their currency with other people that want to obtain that other currency. So it's kind of exchange with the supply of a currency and the demand for a currency. So I want to know a couple of features on this graph. So the equilibrium point where the quantity of a currency intersects with so the quantity demanded and quantity of supplied of a currency intersects is the equilibrium. And then for the demand, this shows like how much or how willing domestic and foreign currencies are willing to be purchased at different exchange rates. And then the supply is how much or how willing the domestic and foreign currencies are willing to be sold at different exchange rates. And I want to know a couple different features of the graph. So it's really important to label the graph as my other student hosts just echoing them. And so the horizontal axis, you should label it the quantity of currency that is being exchanged. So for example, if it's the foreign exchange market for the euro, then you would label it like quantity of euro. So in this example right here, it appears that it's in the foreign exchange market for yen. So you label it quantity of yen. And for the vertical axis, that is the exchange rate of a currency. It's always priced in terms of the other currency. So whatever currency that that kind of you're focusing on, that would be like what's under, or I guess the denominator. So you will always write one currency over the other, and whatever currency that you're focusing the exchange rate on goes under. And whenever there is a change in the Forex market, so either supply increases, decreases, or demand increases or decreases, there will always be one currency that appreciates and the other will depreciate, because the graph is kind of reflecting the changes on these currencies. Okay.
Is Google Slides not working with us today? Oh man.
Thank you guys for being so patient. I'm just gonna refresh the slides real quick. And thank you for staying with us. And now Desmond's going to go over some questions that will be helpful to you.
Yeah, so for right now, we are going to look at the equations that you would really want to know with this one. So this one, like really standard, just measuring economic growth. You're gonna take year one sometimes called the base year. You're gonna do the current year that we're in now, usually, or year two. Subtract that by the base year, usually what it's called, or year one. And all that, like think of it like a parentheses, like in math, you gotta do like parentheses first, yeah. Then you're gonna put that all over year one. And you're gonna multiply that by 100 just for the percentage factor. And you're gonna get the rate of the change in GDP, I should say. And I should pause myself for a little bit. So we're using this equation right here to see that if the economy's GDP has gone up or if it has gone down. Of course, if you get a negative number, you're going to see it's gone down. If you see a positive number, you're going to see it has gone up. Then with the next slide, I'm going to be looking at how you can measure GDP. So this is the most common one that you're going to see on the exam. Expenditures, you're just focusing on spending, right? So first we got consumer spending, just how much that, something else to say too. When you're using GDP, especially with functions like this, we're only going to be measuring final goods, right? So think of it like, let's say I want to make a keyboard, right? And so I need keys to make a keyboard, right? The keys that I make that are going onto my keyboard, those keys are not going to count as a final product because that's not the final product. Those keys are going into my keyboard, the final product. Because if we count those keys, it gets like kind of messy and it's like, how do you measure an economy that way? It's too icky. So we just focus on final goods that are purchased by the consumer, right? That's consumption. Then with investment spending. So what you might think when you think of investment spending, you might think of like machinery for what? Sorry, not mach- you might think of stocks and bonds, the things that those big corporate Wall Street people go and buy and whatnot. So the thing with that, it is investment, but for AP Macroeconomics, that's not the kind of investment that we want to go over. So investment in this case is just anything that a company or something buys to produce more stuff. Government spending, the government wants to stimulate the economy. I think of it like the government wants to build a highway to help better get goods over. That can help stimulate the economy and like make stuff, cheaper to transport because you're not stopping and continuously stopping on city streets trying to get to somewhere to share your goods at, because that uses a lot more gas than just continuous flow on a government-funded highway. And then net exports, because of course countries want to send our stuff abroad. We want to sell that stuff. We cut our exports abroad. Something else to say in GDP. In most cases, usually it'll specify, but if it doesn't specify, GDP is just domestically, well, it's in the name, I should say. GDP is just domestically produced goods that we produce in our country. So if it's something produced in our country but sent abroad as an export, that also counts in GDP. The only caveat to that is that we subtract imports with net exports, hence the name, net exports. We subtract imports because imports kind of take away from our own domestic industries and kind of represent what the economy isn't producing. So we're going to subtract it as well because our imports won't count as GDP since that's not domestic. Then on the next slide, we have, or is it just this one? Because I guess there is another slide after this one, but you don't really need to know super well the income way of doing GDP. So, I'll explain it here as well. Just measuring GDP by income, you're just adding up wages, interest payments, rents, corporate profits. They'll be on your exam. They'll give you that kind of stuff to calculate. But that's not really super common because that's a little bit harder to do. And then something else that we want to do. Something else that we want to do is unemployment as well. You have labor force. What counts as the labor force? What is the labor force is that if you're over 16 and you're seeking employment, you're part of the labor force. So if you're 35 but not seeking employment, you're not part of the labor force. And so you can count labor force participation if you do people in the labor force over the working age population. The working age population is just everyone that's old enough to work, right? Then unemployment rate, where you're just going to be using the number of people unemployed, yeah. Put that over the labor force, the total labor force, multiply that by 100 to get your unemployment rate. And again, unemployment only counts as people without jobs who are actively seeking employment. So those are the functions that you need to know for right now. So we're going to jump into the cram quiz with Yui. You guys have fun.
Thank you so much, Desmond. All right, so we will end with a practice quiz on kind of an overview of all the topics, followed by a Q&A session. So there will be a link posted. You could find it in a second in the kind of green box at the bottom of the screen. And if you click that, you can access, oh, my bad, I meant this one. You can access the practice quiz, and we're going to start that. Or you could also scan the QR code right here if you're having trouble with the link or something. So we'll be starting that shortly. I'm going to switch over to the cram quiz tab. Some music going on. Thanks, guys, for the emojis. Love the enthusiasm. Loving the muscle arm emoji. All right, we're going to be getting started shortly, so I'll wait a couple more seconds. But yeah, we're gonna be starting in like just a few seconds. Okay, awesome. You can always join the quiz if you just press the little green box at the bottom of your screen, and yeah. Alrighty. All right, I'm gonna go to the next question. Awesome! Oh my gosh, you guys all got this question right. Good job. Okay. Great, you guys crushed this one too. I don't know why I can't hear the music, but I appreciate the emojis, guys. Yay. Okay. All right. Very good. So this would be like a actually no, this would be like, well, kind of, Forex, but also kind of comparative advantage. All right, the music's back. Yeah, the muscle emoji. You guys seem to really like that one. We have a lot of gym bros joining the macro session, grinding. I see you. Okay, most of you got that one. So just remember, right? Like movement along the supply curve means changing quantity supply due to the change in price. It's not a shift, right? Because then it would be shifting the curve, but it's simply a movement. Awesome! You guys crushed that one. Also, I'm gonna start moving a little bit faster just so that we have time for our Q&A sessions at the end. At least like 5 minutes. So, try to answer a little bit faster if you can. Yay! Okay. And feel free to check out the survey on the bottom of your screen if you have time. Yay! Okay, so yes, this definition of structural unemployment is unemployment that results from, change of technology, whether it's like, you need a specific kind of skill, and we'll be going to more of that. I think it's in Unit 2, in our Night 1. All right, so remember the business cycle is the graph that looks like that, right? And then there's peaks and troughs, and the troughs is like, where there's like a recession or which results in cyclical unemployment, right? And yeah. Yay! You guys ate this one. Okay, awesome. Yay! So remember the LRES is just like the vertical curve, just looks like that in a aggregate demand, aggregate supply kind of graph, right? Awesome. Next question. Yeah, so just remember, negative supply shock means that supply shifts left, right, which increases prices, and this will make it, this will increase wages and increase production costs or input costs. Okay, I got my gym bros. Yay, awesome. I like the peppers too. Oh my god, you guys crushed that one. I like the pepper emojis. Fun fact, pepper is actually, I believe, like the mascot of Fiveable. Loving the peppers. And his name is Pep. If you want to check him out, there's a visual illustration of him as a character on Instagram. Very cool. More than halfway there, guys. We're almost done. Thank you for staying with us and reviewing with us. We appreciate you, and we appreciate the emojis and engaging with the chat, everything. So thank you. Okay, so we seem to have a little bit of divide on this one. So the equation that represents the relationship between nominal interest rates and real interest rates is real interest rate plus inflation is the nominal interest rate. So remember, nominal accounts or a real adjusts for inflation while nominal doesn't, right? And we'll go over this more in our I believe night 3 review session where night 3 review sessions where we're all gonna go over, like, it's just all unit 4, so we'll go into more detail about this. Yay, you guys got this one. Thanks for the heart. Awesome. Yay! You guys are doing great. Almost there. Yay! You guys got it. So remember, a decrease in money supply means it shifts that way, right? And in turn, it increases the interest rate. Yay! So remember, Desmond talked about this earlier, right? Phillips Curve, inflation, unemployment, and remember it's an inverse relationship in the short run. Okay. You guys were really confident on that one, answered really fast. But the national debt is the total amount of money that a country's government has borrowed. And this is also Unit 4, which will be in our Night 3 review. If you want to, check that out later next week. Yes, awesome. Almost there. 3 more questions left. You guys are killing it. You're getting like everything right. Okay, so we should probably talk about this question. So remember, you have like the current account and you also have the current financial account, I'm pretty sure. And the current account would record earnings from investment in another country's bonds, right? Unit 5, balance of payments. We'll be going over that in more detail in our, I believe, Night 4 review. But yeah, we'll definitely be going over this. And if you want to make a note of it, study this unit more, or hang out with us next week as well. All right, awesome. awesome. You guys really bounced back from that one. Everyone got this question right. And we only have 2 more questions left. Okay, so here's another one where we might not be sure about. Expansionary fiscal policy and trade balance. So obviously, expansionary fiscal policy are things like increasing government spending or decreasing taxes, and thus, by decreasing taxes, you're giving consumers more purchasing power, right? You're shifting that aggregate demand to the right. And so people might be exporting more, or yeah, because you're buying more things from like other countries or things like that. And this could lead to a larger trade deficit. So, yeah, this is kind of like an example where we're really intersecting a lot of different units. Like this one would be intersecting Unit 3 with Unit 5, right? But also Unit 6 with some trade concepts. Alrighty, that was the last question. And we are now done with the quiz. Thank you guys so much. If you stuck with us all throughout this entire quiz, and now we will be doing a Q&A session to address any of your questions, clearing up concepts, anything like that. So yeah, thank you for sticking with us. Thanks for the emojis throughout, and thank you for your support.
Okay, guys, so we're gonna go over that one Phillips curve slide again, like the 4 graphs on it. So this is my fault. I was going a little too fast, so we're just gonna do just a little bit of a clarification on it. So the problem with that slide, I mixed up the positive and the negative output gaps. I was thinking, oh, this will be just like the other graph, and yeah, that wasn't the case. So hopefully my mistake ensures that you guys are not gonna mess up in your exams. So if we go a few slides up to the equilibrium gaps, we're going to see that black and white graph again. So, yeah, there it is. So, here's this one. So, pay attention to the unemployment and inflation rates, right? So, I took one for the team. I like that. So, if you look at the 2% unemployment rate, that look at point A, we see it has like 2% unemployment rate, right? And we have that really high inflation rate, right? I think I was talking about the Phillips curve, but yeah, I was talking about that relationship. So like when you have super high inflation but low unemployment, you see that the economy it's once again, it's doing too much, yeah? We got tons of firms producing stuff beyond what's capable for the economy, right? And so we got lots of people that are employed because you have tons of firms that are producing a bunch of extra stuff. And since we're producing a bunch of that extra stuff, you got a the graph on here is not correct to how we fixed it on the slideshow, but point A in that situation would have been sorry, points, they rearranged it. So yeah, there it is. Thanks, Yui. So points, oh, this is fun. So if you look to the left, right, we have our long run Phillips curve here. We have a point called point C right here, right? This is going to be a positive output gap because we're operating outside our production possibilities. This is the impossible part. This is the underutilization part, right? So this is not the right one either. Because like the right one will have a C on the left, right? This is fun. So just bear with me here with my hand model while we kind of figure this one out. So positive output gap operating outside the PPC right here, yeah? So then of course right here we have our long run Phillips curve right here. And then we're going to have, oh, and this right here, full employment, as I said, here it is. Yeah, this is the right one. So the long run Phillips curve represents our full employment output again. And then you got point A, which is going to represent our negative output, which is just going to be us operating within our PPC, underutilizing our resources, which is going to give us a negative gap, which is going to give us a negative output. And then you have the three graphs to the right over there, which represent what I explained before, right? Have operating within the long run aggregate supply in the situation, you're going to have the negative output gap. Then you're going to have full employment again. Then you have the positive output gap. So when you have the Phillips curve graph and you have the ASAD graph and the LRAS2, they're both going to be flipped on what is a positive output gap and a negative output gap, if that helps explain this concept a bit more. But aside from that, I mean, this is a Q&A. So if you guys have any other questions while we're still here, I mean, we didn't mean to go over 9, but we want to clarify that one. If you guys got other questions too, we're here. So I mean, any other questions? Oh, let me see. Okay, let's look at calculator. Okay, okay, I'm gonna press this button and I'm gonna hope I'm allowed to press this button. So with this calculator, so with the AP Macroeconomics exam, we are now, thankfully, I think like a past year or two or something like that. Point is, you can use a calculator, but you can't, like, let me look. I mean, if it's like a scientific calculator, you can't use a scientific calculator. That's a big no-no. You can only use like yeah, I don't think you can use that calculator. You got to use like, it has to be like the equivalent of a phone calculator basically, but not a phone. Don't bring a phone to your AP exam. It has to be kind of like this. Really basic stuff. If you guys can see, this is my phone. Just really basic stuff. You can buy those pretty cheap. So I guess we got that one. I hope I answered your question. If I didn't, just go in the chat.
Yeah, I answered. It's a four-function calculator. So the only things it should be able to do is like add, subtract, multiply, divide, and that's like those like little ones that are like you can put in your pocket.
Let's see. Can anyone explain to me why the answer in the quiz is correct and why not? Okay. I feel bad. I cannot answer. I mean, Mint, do you remember the question for this question Q&A thing? Yeah,
no,
sorry.
I don't.
I could go over that question. So the last question number 28, was about the role of central banks and how they kind of determine domestic interest rates. So the correct answer was they use monetary tools to set or influence interest rates. And if we look at the other options, I could share my screen. Give me just 1 second. And so, as you can see, A says they adjust foreign exchange rates to impact interest rates. This is not true. They can't really do that. They have no influence over domestic interest rates for option C. This is also not true. And option D, is they rely on market forces to determine interest rates, which is also not true because they have their own instruments. So, for example, some of the monetary policy tools are, as Mint talked about earlier, open market operations or like buying and selling bonds. Um, I think like adjusting the discount rate, is that one of them?
Yep.
Mint, if you could jump
Yeah.
in. So yeah, so some of these are examples of monetary policies that the central banks can use to kind of influence domestic interest rates.
I think someone else had a question about how is currency appreciation slash depreciation related to the vertical axis on the Forex market? Well, on the Forex market, I think Yui talked about that. It's the dollar amount, and then the denominator is whatever market it is. So it's like euros per dollar, it'd be euros under dollars, and then quantity of dollars on the x-axis. And then if the curves shift right, that means the demand for dollars increases, shifts right. You don't want to say up or down. Like I think in the question they said if it goes up, you don't want to say up or down because that's confusing. If it shifts right, then the currency appreciates in the dollar market. But then in the euro market, since Europeans are demanding more dollars, that would be a shift right in the supply of euros. So that depreciates euro, appreciates dollar. So it's like the opposite effects. And I think that's all the questions that we've had. So if you guys don't mind, there's a green box at the bottom that says survey, and you guys can take a survey and let us know how we did tonight.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you everyone for coming. This was a great review session, and we hope that you guys kind of got a really good, preview of the other review sessions that's to come.
Okay, well, it was great to see you guys. Have wonderful. I guess we're all different time zones. Have a wonderful day and slash or night. Hope to see you guys for preview 2. That's preview 2 is Wednesday, yes?
Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Have a great evening.